This is Trend Following Radio, where great thinking comes alive. Nobel Prize winners, legendary traders, best-selling authors, and the pros that know what drive us irrational human beings. I am your host, Michael Covel. Not filtered, raw, honest. That's my passion. Such a cool song. Definitely tripped out on something, no doubt. I happened to have seen a documentary film the other day talking about that band, which I was not familiar with, but the singer of that band I am familiar with, because he actually went on to be the lead singer of Motorhead, for those Motorhead fans out there. Cool stuff. Jumping in today, I want to put out a reminder of the proper way to think, to respond, to act when confronted with certain types of questioning, certain types of not well thought out questioning, certain fallacies. I can think of no better interchange than the classic greed interchange between Milton Friedman and Phil Donahue on his show many years ago. It is timeless.
When you see around the globe the maldistribution of wealth, the desperate plight of millions of people in underdeveloped countries, when you see so few haves and so many have-nots, when you see the greed and the concentration of power within, did you ever have a moment of doubt about capitalism and whether greed's a good idea to run on?
Well, first of all, tell me, is there some society you know that doesn't run on greed? You think Russia doesn't run on greed? You think China doesn't run on greed? What is greed? Of course, none of us are greedy. It's only the other fellow who's greedy. The world runs on individuals pursuing their separate interests. The great achievements of civilization have not come from government bureaus. Einstein didn't construct his theory under order from a bureaucrat. Henry Ford didn't revolutionize the automobile industry that way. In the only cases in which the masses have escaped from the kind of grinding poverty you're talking about, the only cases in recorded history are where they have had capitalism and largely free trade. If you want to know where the masses are worst off, it's exactly in the kinds of societies that depart from that. So that the record of history is absolutely crystal clear that there is no alternative way so far discovered of improving the lot of the ordinary people that can hold a candle to the productive activities that are unleashed by a free enterprise system.
But it seems to reward not virtue as much as ability to manipulate the system.
And what does reward virtue? You think the communist commissar rewards virtue? You think a Hitler rewards virtue? You think, excuse me, if you'll pardon me, do you think American presidents reward virtue? Do they choose their appointees on the basis of the virtue of the people appointed or on the basis of their political clout? Is it really true that political self-interest is nobler somehow than economic self-interest? You know, I think you're taking a lot of things for granted. And just tell me where in the world you find these angels who are going to organize society for us. Well, I don't even trust you to do that.
I simply love how Milton Friedman picks apart assumptions, questions, ways of thinking that Donahue has. I don't assume that Donahue's a bad guy, but these smarmy motherfuckers that have these agendas and they work with these fallacious arguments, these fallacies in their questioning, all to appeal to an audience that usually doesn't use the critical thinking to see how the setup is just false. If there's one guy that I could have ever had on my podcast, he's no longer with us. Man, it just really sucks to not be able to interview Milton Friedman. everything I watch of his on YouTube, and he has classic interchanges. He'll just stand up at a podium and take pot shots from the audience. And he's just methodical, just tears these poor people apart. These poor people that just want daddy government to take care of them. And Milton Friedman just eviscerates them. It's like soul cleansing. It's so awesome. That's one of the great things about YouTube. Hopefully, hundreds of years from now, somebody will tune in to YouTube and watch Milton Friedman and just go, man, that guy's sharp. Love that stuff. It's really just the takedown of bullshit. And bullshit serves a purpose, though. I generally think that people that get caught up in these fallacious arguments, these logical fallacies, they serve a purpose in the marketplace. They're losers. Now, before you jump up and down and think that I'm saying something negative about them personally, no, I'm not. I'm saying they're losers in the sense that when you're not clear about why you're in the market, and I'm just using an example of not clear thinking, but if you're not clear about why you're in the market, if you're not sure why you're there, if you're not sure what your purpose is, if you're not sure how you can lose, then you are surely a loser. You are fodder for a winner in the great zero-sum game. So if you're in the market and you're not thinking clearly, and all I'm saying is these types of questionings that you'll see, for example, in the Donahue-Friedman piece, to me, it's just illustrative of why there's always going to be a chance for trend following to win, for trend following to excel. People are never going to all act rationally. They're not going to act in the prescribed smart way. They're going to do dumb stuff on a regular basis, all the time. And a majority of people, and by no means am I saying I'm perfect. Most of the time I say, I don't know. But isn't that half the battle, to at least admit that you don't know? To not know is to attempt to be intelligent. To think one knows what's going to happen next, or to think that one can think not in a clear fashion and then go into the market and operate and attempt to be sneaky or clever. You're going to get it handed to you. You're going to get it handed to you. So I want to give a few examples. I think the Friedman example is one, but I want to talk about something that happened to me recently. A friend of mine, very successful, been at an investment bank for a while, a fund. He introduced me to an individual who also had a podcast. It was a mutual introduction. There was no particular agenda, but this other guy who's got a bigger show than mine, not the same type of show by any stretch of the imagination, immediately asked me to come on his show. He scheduled a pre-interview several months out into the future. And before I got to this pre-interview, I got this email that said I should be ready to discuss content that would be relevant to an audience of highly educated men in their 20s and 30s. And it must be actionable advice and tips that an audience can use right out of the box. Wow, isn't there a great example there of just more bullshit and the types of thinking that are such great examples of losers in the market? Those people, and this show's not about, the show that I'm about to talk about that I was going to go on, this is not about markets. There's some conversations on the show about markets, trading, and investing, but it's not about that generally. But just the idea that you could tell your guests that they must give something actionable. I mean, this gets into this cohort of these 20, 30s, maybe some 40-something guys. They're too cute by half. They've got it all figured out. Like their skin-deep Google searches their entire life. It's that hipster cool crap. Everything in their life is a supposed hack they can figure out in the next few minutes. Hence, be prepared to talk about actionable advice. Several months rolled forward. I do this pre-interview. Clearly, I get on the phone and the guy has really no interest in having me on. I'm not sure why we even got to the point of having this pre-interview. But it reminded me of something. It reminded me of something that had happened in a prior lifetime for me. Let me play that reminder. A voicemail from Maria Bartiromo to me.
You have one saved voice message. First saved voice message. Hi, Michael. This is Maria Bartiromo calling. How are you? Sorry I missed your call. I do apologize for having to cancel today. It's just that when I read through the details of the shoot, it just occurred to me that this is something different. I probably should not have said yes without having this stuff go through my PR people. I'm sorry about that, but given what's gone on and all the criticism of analysts and the .com boom and bust, I can't, I don't really want to do this open-ended without really knowing more details.
I love that piece. Again, it just says to you loud and clear, if that's how people think, they don't think clearly. But I especially love the aspect that Bartiromo is showing what it really looks like on the inside when you're a media professional paid by a big conglomerate to just keep eyeballs watching so ad dollars can be generated. But roll forward back to the conversation I'm having with this individual who's asked me to come on his show. We're having a pre-interview. And he immediately starts to tell me that his audience, they're not entrepreneurs. They're not interested in finance. I don't know that I do finance. And he wants to know, can we teach them something that's not business, not finance, and not trading type of stuff? The only thing I could think to say was, does your audience want to make money? And he kind of paused for a second. And of course, look, I'm a podcast guy, so I recorded this, and I'm not looking to try and embarrass him by name right now. Maybe I should. It was frankly pretty silly, but he responded to my question about wanting to make money. He said, well, my audience has jobs generally, I imagine, but we don't do finance shows except for retirement shows and setting up index funds. And then he described his audience as regular folks. I responded, I said, hey, listen, okay. And he pretty much said the same thing, that we're not a match. Let's don't do this interview. And I said, I was reading up and I thought this was about a sophisticated audience. And I guess that must have been the wrong thing to say, because he took offense, because all of a sudden he then told me the audience was very sophisticated, so sophisticated that they would argue too much if he happened to have a guest on like me. Again, I hope you can see where I'm going with this. It's not the point that I'm not appearing on this gentleman's podcast. The point is, I sometimes hear the criticism, well, will a trading strategy like trend following continue to work? How can it not continue to work when you have so many examples? I mean, I can go back in time and I can play this clip from Milton Friedman and Phil Donahue in the 1970s. I can play a clip from Maria Bartiromo from about 07, 08? I can tell you this story right now about a guy who apparently has a podcast that does like 1 million listens a month. I mean, that's significantly bigger than mine. But to watch that lack of clarity in one's thinking, to trust the system. Look, if you're an entrepreneur, if you're an entrepreneurial trader, these types of stories should be emboldening. You're like, man, this is why I can be successful, because most of the world is checked out. Most of the world doesn't have a clue. Even the people that have the big audiences, they don't know what the hell's going on. And I got to tell you, for you guys out there in your 20s and 30s and 40s perhaps, that are playing this hipster cool stuff, and the only thing you know in your life is what's going on in a chat forum somewhere or some kind of a Google search, and that's it. That's your only context. Or you happen to know somebody who is employee number 6 at instant messenger company number 7. If that's your sum total understanding, again, it's not being critical of all these people. I'm talking more to the entrepreneur out there that's saying, why will something like trend following continue to excel? Well, it's right back to Daniel Kahneman. It's right back to the behavioral finance, behavioral economics, prospect theory. People do the wrong shit all the time. They're never going to stop. I feel like I have to put the disclaimer in there. I'm not trying to say that I'm all that. I'm just saying when you realize the vast majority of people are influenced to go in the wrong direction, don't know better than to go in the wrong direction. It's exciting as a trading entrepreneur. It's exciting, the opportunities and all those logical fallacies. And I tell you, I do have to share one criticism that I heard recently, and it's a form of, have you stopped beating your wife? And of course, if I say, yes, I've stopped beating my wife, it means that I was beating my wife. And if I say, no, I've not stopped beating my wife, it means I'm still beating my wife. This came up because somebody said, well, Michael, certain group of people don't like you. You should change your behavior. I don't even know who this group of people are, and I don't even know what behavior they're talking about. But it's that, have you stopped beating your wife fallacy. I tend to think that anybody that argues with those types of logical fallacies, those types of loaded questions, in the great zero-sum game, those are the people that will give you their money. They will gladly give you their money in the great zero-sum game that the markets are. Because if they're so unclear about just all aspects of life, this is how they operate, they're going to gladly give up their money. Let me transition out of what some people might term a diatribe into a healthy bit of thinking on risk management and money management for traders. There is no one perfect solution for how much you should risk. It is ultimately a personal decision. I can't tell you that you should risk 0.5% per trade, 1% per trade, 2% per trade, 3% per trade. I can simply give you the ranges, the ideas, the possibilities. It's then up to you and your personal conviction. What do you want in life? And generally the way that it works, the more that you risk, the more that you can make, with a greater chance of more loss as well. So if you risk more, you're facing most likely steeper drawdowns. That doesn't necessarily mean you're going to go to zero, but it means you're facing steeper drawdowns. Risk and reward, each a side of the coin. The game will always be that way. You take bigger risks, and such a great example of it is Bill Dunn. Just a fabulous example. To look at his track record, go find his track record, examine it. It doesn't mean that you have to attempt to be him, duplicate him. But it's a great example of understanding what can happen if you take certain risks over the long term. That equity curve is not going to be a straight line up. If you think you're going to make 1% a month, if you think you're going to have a straight line equity curve up, you are absolutely smoking too much weed. Absolutely. Doesn't work that way. But when you look at somebody like Bill Dunn, and I'm not trying to say that he's perfect or he's the only guy with an answer, it's just a great example to talk about. It's educational. When you look at that track record, you can see what happens when you risk more. If you have a good system, if you stick with it, if you have discipline, and you want to risk more over the long term, then you have a chance to compound a fortune. Then it gets really interesting. That doesn't mean we're all going to do that. That doesn't mean any of us are necessarily going to even copy exactly what Bill Dunn has done. It's a phenomenal track record. Even if you've never heard of Bill Dunn, it's absolutely right there with Warren Buffett. In terms of performance and longevity, it's absolutely spot on, literally almost one of a kind. So So again, back to the risk and reward. Please don't come to me and say, Michael, you must tell me exactly how much to risk. I'm depending on you. No, you're not depending on me. I can give you a range of possibilities. I can give you ideas. I can give you options. Only you can look in the mirror and decide, what do you want for your lifetime? What do you want to try to do? I can't make that decision for you. I'm not about to make that decision for you. I have no interest in making that decision for you. You should be excited to make that decision for yourself. Some news on the way out. I will be in Beijing this month of June, presenting. I've not been back to Beijing, I guess what, it's been 2 years. I'm looking forward to it, especially in the midst of geopolitical saber rattling between my home country and China. I'm looking forward to going to Beijing and not talking about politics and not talking about foreign policy. I'm looking forward to go back and talk to a Beijing audience about trend following. That excites me. That will be fun. And before I close out with one of my favorite psychological clips, just a great reminder. I often play this at presentations and I say, this is the secret to trend following trading. Because if you say the majority of trend following trading, once you get past the system basics, if you say the majority of success is psychologically driven, this clip I'm about to play is gold. It will always be gold. Before I play the clip, a quick reminder. If you enjoy this podcast, if you find it useful, do me a favor. Go to iTunes, and I'll give you a quick URL to find my iTunes page. It's my last name.com/iTunes. Covel, COVEL.com/iTunes takes you right to my iTunes page. If you would do me a favor and drop a review, write a review, I will gladly send you a CD and DVD of trend following extras. Simply write the review, put it on iTunes, drop me an email. My email is really easy. It's my first name at my last name, Mike@Covel.com. I'll send you a DVD and a CD. On the way out, that audio clip that I just mentioned, that pure gold. Bruce Lee is genius. A trend-following trader who did not know he was a trend-following trader. I see a time when those awake will understand how to make money in up, down, and surprise markets. Whether new trader or experienced, college student or financial advisor, protecting against a crash or just trying to make a lot of money, trend following offers everyone an answer in uncertain times. To get started immediately, send me an email, Michael@Covel.com. I will send you the right trend following steps to take along with my free video. But if you want to buy and hold, trust the government and trust Wall Street, this is absolutely not for you.